Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and this is my second video on practical tips for working with astrological talismans. Got a really good feedback. We had a lot of views from the first video, so I decided, hey, let's go ahead and do a second video. We can deal with some more practical issues and maybe delve into some more of the background issues as well. I think the more I've kind of delved into this, I think what's kind of cool about thinking about people's practical approach to talismans is it really reveals what their underlying views are. It also, in this case, we're going to see how it kind of reveals their psychology. So if people tell you, oh, you should do X, or it makes sense to me to do Y, then with how you treat the talisman, then again, like it's telling you is an in-depth view, really, if you look at it carefully, of what their view of what talismans are and even the nature of what reality is. So as I mentioned previously, and I pretty much bring this up in every video I do because I think it's so key, is this idea of worldview. Is that the idea that there's not just one reality, that there's many different views of reality. They're not all equally workable, right? I mean, essentially we're mapping. And you can have a map that fits the terrain more or less, or you can have a map that's completely inaccurate. And you can have everything in between. The map, though, is never going to exactly fit the territory. So again, the models that we have of reality are not reality. I mean, and this is sort of one of those basic sort of postmodern deconstructivist things. I'm not coming at from a postmodern deconstructivist view. When I'm looking at this and saying there's nothing wrong with the fact that the models don't fit reality. In fact, the question of whether we can even see if there is an objective reality, I would tend to question that. I think all we have is our subjective views of reality. But that doesn't mean going to the other extreme that everybody's right, everybody's crazy ideas are just as valid as everybody else's ideas. You test it. You see whether it works. If the model more or less works, useful model, it's going to work for certain circumstances in certain situations. It's going to work for some people, not work for other people. So the key is finding the model that resonates for you and finding that a model that's workable, that fits the reality you're looking at enough that it's usable, as opposed to a model that leads you astray. I mean, one way you can test that is if you have a working model of reality, you should never be surprised. And the more you're surprised, the more things aren't the way they're supposed to be, the more you're upset about reality not conforming to your model, the more that you need a new model. Because it's not reality's fault, it's the model's fault or your fault for embracing that model. So like I said, the underlying worldview for modern people I refer to as atheistic materialism. And atheistic materialism is the view that nothing really exists except matter and energy. Okay, so what we talk about being spiritual, it can mean good. I mean, that's what a lot of people use it for. Spiritual just means positive, it means good, but that doesn't mean anything more than that. Or spiritual means psychological. And psychological, that has to do with the psyche, that has to do with the brain. The brain is a physical organ, right? In brain impulses are, for example, when you're thinking, those are just brain impulses, which are electrochemical, action in the brain. Those can be seen as molecules, and then atoms or electrons, and then those all can be seen as subatomic particles. So everything that happens is basically either due to the physical laws that govern the interaction of subatomic particles or entirely random. So ultimately you have a universe that's composed of an infinite amount of these separate things. They're bumping into each other, that are interacting with each other in physical or energetic ways. And energy is matter equals mc squared. That's all there is. And there's no meaning to anything. Everything's basically just random of these physical laws. And so everything we do is within that context. Now, that's pretty dire. There's only a few people that really embrace the whole I'm an atheist and follow it logically. What most people are doing is they are, and this is, I'm going to do another video about this. I don't think that you're just like, I'm an American and I'm not, so that means I'm not some other nationality. That's kind of artificial. When we're talking about worldview, it really works more like gravitation. So atheistic materialism exerts this gravitational pull on people, but there's other things that are pulling people in different directions. So in terms of looking at any particular person's views or underlying worldview, it's going to tend to be a combination of of these various influences of worldview, say a spiritual worldview, people's emotional state. But the atheistic materialism, like I said, is sort of like a black hole. It has a tremendous amount of pull on anybody in the modern era, myself included. I'm not exempted from that in terms of having that. I can feel that. I think I'm kind of orbiting a ways away from it, and the primary influence on me is a spiritual worldview. But that's going to sound like that's good. Oh, well, that's a good thing to do. We should be spiritual. Ultimately, like I said, if you look at the practical view of reality and how people do things in practice, it's going to reflect their worldview. And so again, for the most part, people are going to reflect, even with talismans, which are magical, which are spiritual, which shouldn't even work under atheistic materialism, people are going to be unconsciously following an atheistic materialistic paradigm. The other thing, and we're going to talk about this more today, is people's psychology comes into this. So a lot of what you see online or social media or people are telling you is coming from this underlying, I would say, either OCD, like an obsessive compulsive sort of view of things, or fear. And so people can do this unconsciously or consciously. I mean, they can be all freaked out and they can infect you with that fear without really meaning to, or people can use it as a manipulation. Do what I say or terrible things are going to happen. And our society, if you think about Western society, for the past, 2,000 years, has basically had this repeated, I guess I could call it propaganda from the established religion, from the church, that any kind of spirituality that's not under their control is bad. So people have a tremendous amount of fear built up about, talismans or spirits or angels or anything like that. I mean, it's interesting, you think of like plastic bottles that have all the different kinds of chemicals in them. You've got this nanoplastics now. We've got electromagnetic fields. I mean, all the stuff that actually really is harmful to people, and we're not worried about it. But we're freaked out about spirits and talismans and things like that. So like shark attacks. Shark attacks hardly ever happen. People are freaked out about it. Car accidents happen all the time, and it's something that people just kind of pass by. So the part of this is programming society. It also punches people's buttons. So that's again something we're gonna delve into as we look at this practical stuff. Ultimately, what I would say about this is, I'm not coming in and saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong. All I'm saying is that it's possible to have alternative views here. And ultimately, everybody is engaged in a process of modeling. For most of us, I mean, all these models are basically I have gotten from other sources. It's not stuff I've come up with on my own. And probably anything you could come up with on your own wouldn't be that good. And when people do think they invented it, it typically is like the 1,000 other people that do the same thing, coming at the same influences. But nevertheless, I think it's extremely important to understand the models and the worldview that you operate from. And I think so ultimately what we're doing here is a sense of a self-discovery. We're certainly getting some useful information about ourselves and our own views, and then we can see other people's views and the influences that come into how they come about, as well as getting some practical information. So again, as I mentioned in the last video, I follow what I call a devotional approach. And so rather than looking at the talismans as an object that's there for me, for my desires, and the magic is in the talisman, what I'm relating to this as is a way of a conduit or a communication with the spirits of the talisman, the angels, or another way to look at it is the talisman is an embodied, ensouled by the spirit. So I take a very respectful approach. I'm not demanding things. I'm not insisting that specific stuff happen. I'm happy to hang out with and form this positive relationship with these angelic beings who are super powerful, not in a position for me to be ordering them around, and then the benefits from that flow, and the benefits really that they're determining rather than me. And again, as I mentioned in the previous video, some people say, no, I want what I want when I want it. I mean, again, that's an approach you can take. That has its ups and downs as well. So again, that's a possible model. It's not the predominant model. I mean, a more magical model of like, give me what I want now is I think what's the mainstream. Nothing wrong with that. Lots of times you need stuff and you want to get it. Again, this is just sort of an alternative. So let's just talk about some specific issues and that come up not infrequently. One of the things I'll get people ask me questions about with talismans is that they'll say, okay, so I got the talisman, I did the consecration, I've had it for a while, and I'm kind of done with it, or I have this friend that could use it. Can I just give it to my friend? And so again, this I think is very illuminating in terms of sort of people's approach of what a talisman is. So if you're thinking of a talisman as a battery, like I said, that's sort of charged with some sort of impersonal energy, it's a thing, right? It's sort of like an iPad or something, or like, like I said, I've got this watch or any kind of object or machine or something that you buy, a car, whatever. It's just a material object. It does things for you, right? You own it. If you want to smash it up, you can smash it up. You want to throw it away, you can throw it away. It's there for your use. And then if you don't want to use it anymore, you can dispose of it and you can just transfer it. It's going to work just as well for somebody else as it works for you. So again, with a talisman, like I said, if it's like a battery and it's charged, the magic is in the talisman, and whoever owns the talisman or has the talisman, then the magic follows it. So, following that logic, if someone stole it, they could use, just like their iPad, if you don't have a password or the protections on it, they can use that iPad or the iPhone or whatever. If they steal it, they can use it, they've got it, they're the ones in control of it. So, ultimately under this view, the talisman, because it's a material object like any other material object, and as I said, you can use it for your benefit, it's there for you to use, you can do whatever you want with it, and of course you could transfer it if you want to give it away. So, and again, not an unreasonable approach. Given those, if those are the assumptions, if that's the model you're working from, it makes perfect sense. And it's also kind of nice from the idea that, okay, it's mine and I can do whatever I want, that I'm in control here. Devotional approach, again, like I said, the talisman's not really the source of the magic. The talisman is, you could think of it being ensouled, or said you're communicating with it, but ultimately the power is coming from the spirit. And so I think of the talisman much more as a means of contact, as a means of connection, as a portal to the spirit. And my view of it would be, and a devotional view of it would be, that the power is coming from the spirit, not from the talisman itself. The talisman is just a useful way of communication. And in fact, you don't even need the talisman to communicate with the spirit. If you want to do the daily planetary practice, or you're doing a daily or more regular fixed star practice, you don't even need a talisman. Now, I do have talismans that are used for that, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do that if you wanted to do that. You think about it though, if you're talking about the talisman as a means of communication, and the ultimate point of it is to communicate and then form a relationship with the spirit, and then that's where the connection comes from, and that's sort of the conduit for getting the effects, then that's a different view of that the magic is in the talisman. Think about it. A thief steals my phone with my friend's number on it and calls up the friend and says, I've got the cell phone with your number on it, now you're my new best friend. That's not going to work out. In fact, you're probably going to get arrested for that. Because again, it's not the having of the phone that's getting you the friendship, it's the relationship that you built up with that individual person. So my practice has been that once you consecrate the talisman, once you start the relationship, it's your relationship, and it's not transferable. Again, like I said, you can't call up the spirit and say, oh, by the way, here's your new best friend, I'm just going to transfer my relationship here. It's not illegally, you can't assign it. It's personal. And I'll look on, people told me, oh, they're selling your talismans on eBay, and I'm like, I think that's questionable. I just don't think that's, it makes sense. I got this. I want to get some money for it. I want to sell it. You can't sell the friendship. You can't sell the relationship. So again, from a devotional standpoint, that's what I come from. Again, if you're coming from the standpoint that's like, like I said, it's a battery, then yeah, go ahead. There would be nothing that would stop you from doing the transfer, because it's just an object, and the magic comes from the object. So again, what we're seeing from this is, what are people's underlying view of how the magic works? Or maybe they're just not even conscious of what it is. So this kind of raises some other practical issues. So like I said, so the practical thing there would be, well, the transfer is problematic. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it just makes me a little uncomfortable, this idea of, like I said, here's your new best friend. So people ask me, can I get a talisman as a gift? Can I get a talisman for someone else? Usually it's a family member, but it can be friends or somebody's got problems or something like that. Again, I would say that's a very thoughtful thing to do. This is not a transfer though. If you're getting, if, for example, if you're just buying the talisman and I'm sending it to somebody else and they're doing the consecration, obviously there would be no problem with that. If you're, for example, for a family member like children, this is a classic one. Your kids are, having some kind of a problem. You want to help them out or something, so you get a talisman for them. They're too young or they're not interested in doing the consecration, or if they're older, they might be, like I said, atheist and materialist and not really want to do that. And they may not even be against the talisman, but they don't want to do the ritual. What you can do is you can get the talisman, and right from the get-go, you can do the consecration for them on their behalf. So because you're connected to this person, because you care about them, and also because you're starting off and you're being very explicit with the spirit about what you're doing here, it's what your function is, you're establishing. So now it's not going to be quite a strong relationship if they didn't do it themselves, but nevertheless, I still think it can be effective, and I still think that's a worthwhile thing to do. So yes, definitely, you can get a talisman for somebody else, and then when you start from the beginning, initially consecrate it for them. Another thing that people ask me about is, particularly protection talismans, will this talisman protect my family and everyone in my household? And I think, again, this is just sort of like instinctive for my part. I think as a general matter that yes, if you have a protection talisman, it's going to have a little bit of a broader range. And the other thing you can do is you can ask when you do the consecration. I do that myself. I do algol. I'm asking to protect my family and my house and even my neighborhood. And so every time I do the invocation, I'm explicitly making that request. Now again, the angels are not under your control. You can't force them to do that. But nevertheless, the fact that you're asking for that, I think, and you're making that intentionality clear, and that's perfectly reasonable. Like I said, I really don't want to have a situation where I'm saved and the rest of my family is suffers some problem. That doesn't appeal to me at all. It's almost like I'm a unit. And that's what I would say about the consecration stuff. Is very typically, if you're consecrating for somebody else, this is somebody you have a close emotional and spiritual connection to because they're a family member or a friend or something like that. So again, there's already the connection built up. Now, just doing it for other people, the further your relationship is away, the further the connection is, the less of the connection is there inherently. So that's what I would say about it. So I don't think there's a specific yes, no answer, or like how far away of a connection do I need to be the person or something like that. It's something you'd have to fill out for yourself. But I do feel this instinctive sense that it's perfectly fine to get talismans for other people. It's perfectly fine to be consecrating for other people, particularly as someone you care about. And I don't know why else you'd buy a talisman if you didn't care about the person. So the other thing, like I said, as far as protecting the household is, yes, I think it protects the household, but you could specifically, again, consecrate it on their behalf when you do the talisman. So not only ask for them, but also actually consecrate it on their behalf, as being one of the people that you want the talisman to work on behalf of. So again, I think all those work together, and that's a way it's not really a transfer, but it's a way to have a little broader use of the talisman. And if you start from the beginning with that and making it clear to the spirit that that's your intentionality and that's what you want to do, I think that definitely has an impact. And so again, that would be a way to, if you wanted to pass a talisman on to your children, include them in the beginning as part of the ambit of what you're looking for. So again, like I said, but this is again coming from a devotional standpoint. It's totally unnecessary if you're coming from the standpoint that it's a battery of spiritual energy. Then you just give it to them, and it's not a problem. Devotional practice, you need to think about it. You need to take a different approach. But again, what your approach is gonna be revealed. Is going to reveal your underlying views of how it works and what's actually going on. So then storage. Again, typically, I think that from a devotional standpoint, I just feel more comfortable with talismans. Again, people sometimes ask me is it okay to have more than one astrological talisman? I don't know about anybody else's talisman, but certainly Renaissance astrology talismans, it's fine to have as many as you want. I think I have about 50. My allegiance is to the celestial spirits in general. So the fact that I don't have a talisman of a particular, I actually have all the planets, but don't have a talisman of a particular celestial factor like a star or something. It doesn't mean that I don't have an innate sort of already connection and allegiance to that. I'm just not working with it right now. That's sort of my attitude. And what I like is the idea, though, of even if you have a lot of talismans, that they all have their own space. Okay, I just think respectful, like maybe their own box, or if you have I mean, I've had people that have fancy wooden boxes or something, and they had, individual compartments in it, maybe in their own, the talisman then have their own pouch, for example. That's another way to do it. But just so they have their own little space. A thing that I love to do with talismans is all Renaissance astrology talismans come with a postcard size consecration image. I like to take that image and put it up, like make the top of a bookshelf, like the altar space, and put the card up behind it. You can put the candle in front of it, the talisman in front of it. You light the incense when you do the consecration. So you have almost like a little mini altar, but it can be on an altar with a bunch of other. And you can see behind me, you can see the cards that are up there. Even though this is an altar that's got multiple things on it, there is a separate space for each of the sort of devotional things that are going on with it. So again, it's a combination of things. Again, you can see more over behind me. You can see there's a fixed star altar. There's a banner there, and then a bunch of postcards and mirrors. You can see the circular and diamond-shaped mirrors. That's another example. That's you can see about half the fixed stars. It's about 8 of them of the 15 or 16 that I have up there. That's another way to do it. And then you can, again, do the ceremony or the ritual that you're doing on that altar in front of it. But again, each of those fixed stars has its own space. It's got its own sort of, it's been paid respect. So that, again, that's how I think about storage. And again, don't get it dirty. Don't let your dog chew on it. Again, it's like if you had a rich uncle that gave you a Rolex, really expensive watch, you would want to treat it with some respect. So again, and not that, you're going to get lightning bolts zapping you if you don't, but it's just like you just want to have it in a devotional practice. You want to have it just manifest general respect. If you're not respecting the spirits, you can't expect them to be responding very well to you if you're disrespectful. Another issue, and this comes up, and this is where I think that the psychology to a certain extent comes into it. There's a lot of, not a lot, but I mean there's a persistent sort of drumbeat of social media stuff, of people getting worried about people seeing your talismans, and especially other people touching your talismans. So first, let's talk about seeing. One of the Picatrix, Picatrix mentions this for a very few number of talismans, that they'll say keep it hidden. So for example, one of the Picatrix house-based well talismans says that. It's like, make the talisman and then hide it. Now, I haven't seen this as a particular problem. I mean, this specific house-based talisman, lots of people have had them. Lots of people, I mean, they're beautiful talismans. People like to wear them. I haven't noticed that people are having a problem with other people seeing their talisman just from them wearing it. So, I mean, that's really a personal issue. Like I said, if someone is coming in and telling you, it's instant death or destroys the talisman or something like that, I think that's, from my standpoint, a questionable thing to say. Maybe that's true for them. The other thing I would say about it, and this is what we're getting into with the touching it, that's a much more of an issue that people seem to be really worried about. And I've seen this website with talismans, astrological talismans, elections, and all that stuff seem like all the way, very much based on the stuff that I've been doing. But they're like, we always wear nitrile gloves at all times. And I'm like, I don't really understand what the thought process is behind that. What are the assumptions? Is somehow that magically that rubber repels magic or something? That, so if I suppose you could wrap it up in rubber and then it would, that would be isolated or something like that. I mean, it would, there wouldn't be any magic coming out of it. You could block the magic with rubber. I mean, it's okay to touch with rubber, but not your bare hands. Again, the thought process there is a little weird to me. I think it's coming from, this sort of idea of like a hospital where you've got germs, and the germs really can't get through the rubber gloves, or like you're washing dishes and they'll keep you. But this is all physical stuff, right? I mean, the idea that rubber somehow, or that, it stops magic or has some spiritual barrier or something like that, that's a little weird. Okay, and so I said there's two things going on with this. I think one is coming from atheistic materialism, where you're talking about material, like I said, germs, which are physically real, or some kind of like stains or something like that you get from washing. Other thing I'd say is OCD, right? I mean, this is a classic thing, like, you got to wash your hands 7 times, everything has to be clean. Like you say, have 50 bars of soap, and you got to get a new bar of soap every time you wash your hands. Very ritualistic. You're starting to get into some sort of psychological stuff here. And the don't touch it, you'll ruin it. I mean, you can't even get it repaired apparently. People are freaking out that, oh my God, if I want to have some, jewelry repair or something like that, or even worse, it gets shipped to me and the mailman might have, they might have opened it in customs and therefore it's totally destroyed. It's like, that sort of stuff, like I said, it seems to me that that's kind of getting into people's, to an OCD or some sort of psychological issues about, pollution or something like that. Because I don't think that that's definitely necessarily going to. I mean, if you did think there was a problem with it spiritually, you could, probably do a cleansing ritual or something like that with some salt or something or whatever. But I tend to think that that's what you're getting is this combination of sort of physical dirt weirdness mixed in with, like I said, OCD and psychology, and then not really thinking about how that really works spiritually. So again, I don't think it's. I do actually keep talismans and zips. But it's it's for two reasons. One, they don't tarnish as easily when they're to zip, and also it keeps them cleaner. And the fact that people are so freaked out about it that I'm sort of forced into that to a certain extent. I don't really think it's that big a deal. I certainly, on one hand, I don't necessarily have people constantly handling my talismans if I'm wearing them. But that's more, again, from a respect standpoint. I don't think that, because people say, oh, someone accidentally touched it, so now it's ruined. Like, I don't think so. I don't see there's anything in a traditional source about astrological talismans that says anything like that. And if people are coming up with that, it's anecdotal evidence. My father's grandmother's barber, he had a talisman and someone touched it and his head exploded. That sort of thing. It's like, I don't think so. The other thing people are doing is they're trying to control you by scaring you. Most people are newbies at this. If someone's like, oh yeah, you got to do it this way or terrible things will happen, they'll believe it. Particularly, like I said, because we have this cultural programming to be afraid of spiritual stuff. Again, and if you want to buy into it, that's fine. That's just, you have a choice. That's just said, if you want to be all freaked out about it, it's unfortunate though, is that this is sold as the gospel truth to people. And so therefore people get all worried about it and freaked out about it. And a perfectly workable talisman, again, like I said, shipping through customs, I don't know how you're going to avoid that, right? So then, oh my God, I wasted all that time, energy because of customs. It's like, it's not messing up the talismans. We've shipped talismans all over the world for 20 years and never had a problem with that. I've never had anyone report back that all of a sudden this talisman wasn't working because someone touched it in customs. It's like, no, I don't think so. So it's like, whatever. But I think, so that's what I would say is I'm kind of live and let live with that. And I'm like, if you want to do that, fine, but don't go around putting that on other people and freaking people out. And also don't let yourself get freaked out by it too. If, it's a lot of the stuff is, again, getting into psychology. The touching it stuff, that seems to me to be, like I said, getting into people's psychology or into sort of OCD kind of thinking with it. Not necessarily what I would go with. But like I said, if it resonates for you, great, you go with that. Brings up another, I think, final issue. I guess what I would, again, that's just to sum up the devotional practice with the touching stuff is like, I wouldn't get too worried about it. Pawing it and, like I said, like giving it to your dog, it's disrespectful. As long as it's not disrespectful, it's not a problem. And even if it's disrespectful, the angels will understand. If you think about it, it's like, I have this beautiful rosary, my mother got it for me in Rome. I always use it when I do a novena. And, somebody else touched it and it's like, now I have to throw it away. I'm like, no. Mary's going to understand. She's, you can go out, probably get it blessed or whatever, do a cleansing or something like that if you're really worried about it. But it's not ruining it in my view from a devotional standpoint. Others, may have a different view of it. So the final issue I think I want to talk about is disposal. And so, again, this kind of gets back to this idea of the talisman as a battery or a talisman. It's like an iPad or something. It's like, okay, it's there for me to use. I got it to do stuff for me. It either gave me what I wanted or didn't give me what I wanted, so I'm done with it. I want to get rid of it. I don't want it anymore. And now how do I throw it out? But I'm worried about throwing it out because what? Demons are going to come get me or whatever. I'm worried about it. I want to toss it out, but I don't exactly know how to do that because it's a spiritual thing. I'm a little nervous about just tossing it out. So I guess what I would say about it is that, again, for me with a devotional approach, the talisman isn't the focus of what I'm doing. And even though I'm not using a talisman right now, it doesn't mean that I have no relationship with that astrological spirit. I mean, I feel like I have a sort of basic, at least capacity for the relationship with every single astrological spirit, that I'm a celestial priest, and then I'm kind of consecrated already to all the celestial factors. And I'm just kind of, depending on what my circumstances are, the planets, for example, I do daily planetary practice, so once a week I'm interacting with them. I have some fixed stars that I do every day, but I have other factors that I've maybe never actually done a specific consecration for, but nevertheless I still feel a connection to. So I have a lot of talismans, and like I said, I don't feel like, well, I'm done with them. I got what I wanted, so I'm going to get rid of them. I mean, ultimately, the devotional approach is to have a long-term relationship, and it's not so much based on, okay, give me what I want now and I'm done with it. Again, that's more magical. I don't think that's anything wrong with that, but it's a little bit alien to a devotional approach. And then I just think the other thing would be that, again, like I said, you have a rich uncle, they gave you this really expensive watch, and you're like, well, I'm done with it, I'm going to throw it out, or I'm going to sell it. I mean, again, you might feel a little uncomfortable doing that, just as a matter of respect. So then it comes down to really the respectful thing. If you really do, and sometimes people will feel like, okay, the talisman's been, it's been problematic. Now that's another issue too, is like, I got the talisman, and 6 weeks later, my mother-in-law's barber's accountant fell down the stairs, so I got to get rid of the talisman. I mean, did the talisman even cause that? That's spiritual stuff. Is hard to figure out the causality, and anecdotal, you're freaked out about it, it's nervous. Everyone's freaked out about spiritual stuff. It's probably bad. I'm going to assume it's bad unless everything goes 100% my way. And if it doesn't go 100% my way, obviously it was the talisman's fault. Again, I'm not sure if that's thinking how I really want to be thinking empirically or logically about it. Which isn't to say that, again, that's what the scientists say. No, anybody's magical worldview is obviously insane. I don't think that. I think I'm trying to be as logical and empirical as I can. Now, for example, with algol, this is an example of something where I think that the effects are a little more, clear. I mean, I've had this happen myself, and I've had, I don't know, probably 100 people tell me that when they initially got their algol talisman, some of the first things that happened was electrical, electronic, or internet interference. And I mean, I just had someone recently say I did my first consecration, and as soon as I picked up the materials to put away after doing the consecration, a light bulb blew out. I'm like, I think that's pretty classic algol. Now, if that's the only thing that happened, if it was a Deneb-el-Gedi talisman, the light bulb blew out, I don't know if I would consider that to be connected to the Deneb-el-Gedi. I mean, in time it is, but it's the algol having it repeatedly happen with so many different people and having the same thing happen with so many different people. After a while, you say, you know what, that looks like an effect. Anything else, the anecdotal stuff, it's like extremely hard to figure out what, and really what you're revealing is your underlying psychology and then your view of reality. And so whether or not you'd even want to be getting rid of it, like I said, that's not a particularly devotional approach to it. So what do you do if you really need, like I said, but you are in a situation where you're okay, I feel like I need to get rid of this talisman. What I would be doing is deconsecrating it. So you basically do the same thing for consecration. You pick an astrologically appropriate time, call on the spirit, and then you thank them. You say, thank you, I really appreciate everything you've done for me. Really appreciate, you as a celestial spirit, you're great, but, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to ask you to break the connection or, unsoul the talisman or whatever. I'm going to essentially deconsecrate it. And then you're dealing with an object that doesn't have the level of spiritual connection, and then you can dispose of it. And that's a little, again, see, this is from a practical standpoint, I mean, most of us live in cities. So the deconsecration stuff, traditional stuff, is stuff like a hoodoo thing, like throw it in running water, bury it at a crossroads. None of this stuff is really very practical for people in a city. I guess you just put it in the trash. It's basically how you handle it for the most part. And again, that makes me feel a little uncomfortable with talismans. So that's what I would say about it. Is it's like, again, I think it's certainly possible to dispose of talismans, and basically what you're doing with that is to do it in a respectful way. You want to deconsecrate it first, and then do it as respectful as possible under the practical circumstances, and that's how you handle it. That, I think, reveals a devotional approach. I mean, the fact that that's my instinctive reaction to it, it says, okay, Warnock has a devotional approach. Because the focus then is on this relationship, and it's like having a friend and then just saying, I don't want to be friends anymore with you. I mean, I'm done with you. I got what I wanted out of you, and I don't need you anymore, so take a hike. That's not a very respectful way of going about it. If it's a battery, then you just toss it. I mean, if it's you don't need it anymore, it's not recharging properly, then you just get rid of it. So again, the modeling that you use, the practical application of it, that reveals what your underlying views are. Both, like I said, what your view of causality is, and then what your ultimate view of what the nature of reality is, and then how you're approaching it. So like I said, as I'm going through this, I wouldn't want to, obviously my opinion is clear. I mean, I have very clear preferences, but that's what it is. Now, at the same time, this is the preference that's expressed by the person who started the whole ball rolling in terms of astrological magic. I mean, no one would be doing astrological magic probably now if I hadn't got this going, which isn't to say that I own it, but what it's saying is that my opinion deserves to be given a little bit of credence and a little bit of respect. At the same time, the recognition is that there's other ways to go, okay? If the way that I do it resonates with you, fantastic. If it doesn't resonate with you, you're not going to say, oh, Warnock is completely an idiot. I don't think that's really a fair approach. I mean, like I said, given the work that I put in and everything. But never, at the same time, you can say, you know what? That doesn't resonate for me. I'm going to go with an alternative approach. And again, like I said, I don't want to say that the other approaches are wrong. It doesn't resonate for me, and it's not an approach that I would take. So I think what's cool about this, like I said, is you've got some practical information here. How do you, deal with, various practical issues, with, say, for example, transfer of talismans, storage of talismans, having other people see it or touch it, and disposal in a devotional approach. What's a typical way that you deal with it? So now you can say, okay, well, since I follow a devotional approach, that makes sense to me. This is what I'm going to do I'm going to put talismans in the boxes now or whatever. But on a deeper level, what we're seeing here is, you can see kind of my psychology and my approach, just by my practical, answers to these sort of practical questions. And I think that's true of anybody else. So ultimately, I think the key of this is to try to be conscious of the models that you're following, the worldview, and how much your own psychology is affecting this. And what that leads you to is it really undermines the view that you're 100% objectively right. And what you come down to is that I'm a manifestation of these various forces coming together, of the modern worldview or spiritual worldview, of my psychology, of the methodology that I chose. I mean, you could probably look at your chart and, figure out, you could see the forces manifesting themselves there. So I think that's one of the things that I really want to offer to the astrological and esoteric community is the fact that we are always modeling. Some models work better than others, again, but that's and a lot of times a matter of opinion. Some models don't even work at all, but no model is absolutely perfect. And anyone that says that they're 100% right, you could be sure that that person doesn't know what they're talking about. So great. I hope these practical tips are useful, and I hope they're kind of engaged with some of the deeper issues that the practical issues reveal.